Good afternoon. My name is Buffy. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney, and today we're talking about cases where the evidence just stops. Some cases go cold because time passes. That makes sense. But some cases go cold because something doesn't make sense from the very beginning. And those are the ones that stay with you. Because you can feel that something is off, you just don't know what it is. You just can't prove what. Because some cases can be extremely confusing. Things don't add up. Things don't make any reasonable sense as to why they would have happened. Excuse me. And I covered a case earlier, Jason Landry, and it got me thinking about a pattern I've seen in multiple cases where there is an event. In these particular cases, it's actually a car crash. And something disrupts the normal timeline, and then everything just stops, right? There's nothing that seems to fit a recognizable pattern. And tonight I want to walk through a few of those with you because I don't think these are random. I know people say, hey, random things happen all the time. Sure. But it just seems very strange that the circumstances evolved the way they evolved. And so one gentleman had his clothes off. After a car crash that he should have walked away from. Another gentleman seemed to be in massive distress as he's making a 911 call. All sorts of things that you just would not think that would happen. And it's not that they were in the similar locations. It's just that the circumstances, the car and all of that is just a strange thing that's happening, right? So these aren't just unsolved cases. They're cases where the evidence should tell us something and it doesn't. For whatever reason, it's not telling us what we need to know. So if you're a true crime, welcome guys. Today we're talking about cases where the evidence just stops. Some cases go cold because time passes, but some cases go cold because something doesn't make sense from the very beginning. And those are the ones that stay with you, the ones that keep you up at night, the ones that you keep thinking about, the ones that you want to solve. You want to figure out a resolution because you can feel that something is off. You just can't prove what. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Buffy. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney. I've done criminal trials and done a lot in the criminal law arena. And so I am analyzing these cases and going through them with you. This is Grace and Gavel, where truth meets compassion. And those are the ones that stay with you, right? I covered a case earlier, Brian Landry. Hello, how are you? Welcome. Jason Landry. And it got me thinking about a pattern I've seen in multiple disappearances where there's an event. In this particular case, it's a car crash. And something disrupts the normal timeline. And then everything just stops. Very good, thank you. And how do things stop? Tonight, I want to walk through a few of those with you because I don't think these are random. These aren't just unsolved cases. They're cases where the evidence should tell us something, should give us some idea of what occurred at the scene. So let's go into Jason Landry first. So Jason Landry crashes his car on the way back from Christmas vacation in college to see his family in a back road in Texas. Not a catastrophic crash, right? Something that you could walk away from. But when they find the scene, here's where things get weird. It doesn't look like someone walked away. His belongings are scattered. His clothes are removed, which who knows why he would have done that. It's not like he was dealing with hypothermia or something like that. And there's no clear direction of travel. So that makes you wonder, like, did somebody pick him up? Did somebody get into maybe a crash with him or something to potentially get him out of his vehicle? But the clothing thing really doesn't make a lot of sense. And then his belongings scattered and spewed everywhere. And so it can be extremely difficult to try to navigate that. Anybody have an idea that could explain the pattern? I do think that maybe disorientation may have played some role in it. Maybe there was some other thing that we didn't know as far as maybe a substance or alcohol or something like that that might explain the confusion. but it doesn't explain the structure in a scene like that. And Jennifer Kesse, I know a lot of you may know about Jennifer Kesse. I actually lived in Orlando around that time. She actually lived in Metro West, which was a new and upcoming area at the time. And I talked to a law enforcement officer who was a little puzzled as to why she was in that area, because he didn't think it was as safe as an area for a young woman to be in. And so Jennifer disappears going to work, a routine, predictable morning, right? Her car is found, and police actually have surveillance footage, so they think that things are going to be looking up of the person who parked it. But every single frame blocks his face, every single one. Not blurry, not dark, just perfectly obstructed. How does that happen? Is that someone who had experience in this? Was that someone who had mapped everything out and planned the perfect crime, so to speak? Because that happened in around 2004, 2005, and she's still missing. They haven't found her. Her family's still working on it. They're working on DNA testing and things like that. Because that's not missing evidence. That's unusable evidence that cannot be used. We cannot figure out who that person is unless someone comes forward. Now let's go into Brandon Lawson. And then there's Brandon Lawson. Everyone says his 911 call sounds paranoid, chaotic. To me, he sounds extremely desperate. He sounds extremely afraid. He talks about, essentially, you hear hit 2 vehicles each side, things like that, which it's all in kind of pieces. It's very muffled. If you want to check it out, you can check it out on YouTube, the Brandon Lawson 911 phone call. But what if we've been listening to it wrong? What if what he wanted us to know was that he felt that he was in danger, that there were people that were targeting him, and he wanted some help because he said, I need the police to respond. But beyond that, we really don't know much more than that. What if instead of confusion, he was trying to describe something happening in real time? And maybe he was scared. Maybe he didn't know how to get the words out. Maybe he was trying to get out as much as he could before the person potentially harmed him. Have you ever heard something and then later realized that you misunderstood it completely? I know, like when we were kids and we used to play telephone, like how often was the message muffled by the time it got to the end of the line? 100% of the time, right? Because people hear what they want to hear. People make interpretations that they want to make because their human brain likes completion. It likes things that are filled in. And so we fill things in even though they may not be correct, right? So here's the pattern that stands out to me. The pattern that stands out to me is all 3 of these cases start with something very ordinary: driving home, going to work, calling for help, and then something interrupts the moment. And after that, there's no clear explanation. How does that happen? How does that happen? Right? That's not just mystery. That's a break in the narrative. Anyone have one that bothers them more than the others? I think Jennifer Kesse is really extremely disturbing because they almost had it. They almost had it. Which one feels like it should have the answer? I think Jennifer Kesse most likely should have had the answer because they had the surveillance footage. They were this close, this close. Do these cases feel like they could potentially be connected in the broad scheme of things, like a pattern that people use? I still don't understand the clothing thing, though. I mean, I just think that that is very odd and very strange because, like I said, it's not like he was dealing with hypothermia. I don't know, maybe he hit his head and was confused and, or are they completely separate, So in closing, we don't need to jump to conclusions to recognize when something doesn't fit, right? And sometimes the most important part of a case isn't what we know, it's what refuses to make sense. And those are the cases I'll keep coming back to. Also, if you want a larger piece, I do actually do Grace and Gavel, Where Truth Meets Compassion. It is housed on YouTube. And I also have a psychology channel called Recovering Perfectionist Mama, Grace in Progress. That is also on YouTube, and it's the same username. So feel free to check that out. And I just want to say thank you to everyone for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.